I'll be your host, Emmanuel Alea, CEO and founder of Alea Systems, where we build systems that build brands online and help e-commerce entrepreneurs go from $10K a month to $100K a month to $1 million a month in revenue without wasting a fortune on ad spend or working themselves to death to do it, so that they can finally pay themselves what they deserve out of their business. We do this because we have built our own e-commerce brands. We've done over $50 million in revenue for our own brands and our clients' brands in our agency, and we're just getting started. These systems that we teach, they work, they are effective, they're repeatable, they're scalable. They've worked for our businesses, they've worked for our clients' businesses, and they'll work for your businesses too. Welcome to Alea Systems Podcast, Journey to an 8-Figure E-Commerce Business. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Ryan Woolf, who's somebody that goes way back with me. We graduated from the military academy in 2004, and over the last 20 years, Ryan has amassed a wealth of knowledge in operations, which is near and dear to my heart as an ops guy, where, my saying is always, marketing is my second language. Operations is my first love. And so I have a phenomenal conversation with Ryan that I'm sure you're going to get a kick out of. You'll see exactly the tips and techniques that he uses with business leaders to help them get the best results from their e-commerce businesses and all kinds of different businesses. But we're going to get to really see how he breaks down in detail what he does with his clients and how his operations services truly help them get the most results. These are lessons that we all could use in our businesses, whether we're e-commerce or any kind of business. These operations principles work. You'll also get to hear a lot of insights into him and his own business, as well as him and his own family life, right? As he moves along this entrepreneurial journey. Pay particular attention to his description of being a band dad. I got a real kick out of that, and I was very amused, and I know you're going to enjoy it just as much as I did. And also, I'm sure you'll get a kick out of why his kids won't let him be on TikTok. That was my favorite part, and I know you're going to enjoy it. You're going to get a lot out of this episode, and so without further ado, please enjoy this episode. And now, here's Ryan Woolf. So hi, Ryan Woolf. Welcome to the Alea Systems Podcast. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Emmanuel. It's great to see you again.
Wonderful. Would love to start out and just hear kind of your story and what it is you're working on and what you're doing.
As you mentioned, my name is Ryan Woolf, and I am the owner and founder of a consultancy called Spartan 36 Solutions. And it's kind of interesting when we were talked before and kind of talk about things in the past. It's what is the backstory and how did I get here? Well, I never actually planned to be an entrepreneur. I'd worked for a large corporation when a great opportunity came up for our family, which meant that I would have to leave my job. We moved from Illinois to California. And honestly, I started a company to explore leadership development just as a filler while we moved and while we settled in. A year later, we moved again, and that's where I really started to focus on the company. And kind of what I found out, though, is that while I loved leadership development, that market is very saturated, and it's very high level or name recognition saturation as well, if that makes any sense. So. Yep. But what I did find out is that organizations wanted to pay for the hard skill set that I had, which was process improvement, specifically taking lean principles and applying them to a back office, not on the factory floor environment. So I started to do process improvement work for companies. And from there, it really morphed into realizing that organizations need a blend of solutions kind of under the strategy operations bucket. So it's a kind of a blend of executive coaching, and business consulting, process improvement, and management. So that's a little bit of the journey that I've been down to get to where I am today and kind of offering the suite of services that I do to clients.
Man, so it sounds like you've been steeped deeply in the ops world and process improvement and helping people figure out their mess.
Exactly. That's a great way to say it. It's organizing people's junk drawers.
Oh, I love that. Because I find it's almost like, how do you deal with this? Here's a question is, you hear in terms, the old adage that you want to sell painkillers, not vitamins. And, in the business world, a lot of people want to pay for, business owners and entrepreneurs want to pay for marketing and more advertising to generate more revenue because they think that that's the way to solve all of their ops problems, just grow their way out of it, just get more, then they can hire more people. How do you handle telling people or helping people, guiding people to the understanding, hey, you actually need to solve your operations, which will free you up to start making more revenue and making more money?
What's interesting is that I've noticed that a lot of people or a lot of organizations will have a single area that the leader, which is usually the owner or a president of a company, sees as broken. And they're like, something is broken here because either a critical person, tool, or process didn't exist or left the company. So they'll find that something is broken and they need somebody to come in and pick up the pieces and figure out, why is this broken? And then from there, after solving that initial, this process is broken because either people, process, or a tool, then we can kind of dig into, all right, now there are other areas within the company that need this help. And or what it ends up being a lot of times is really the owner is working in their company. And they've got into the business of, say, selling t-shirts, right? Because they really wanted to sell t-shirts. And all of a sudden they're doing finance, or as you mentioned, marketing. So it's really just a foot in the door to a company saying, I can help with your process, or you have this area that's broken. And that just puts a magnifying glass or shines a light on the overall problems, which is all of the operations, not just a single component of it.
And then let's say I'm a business owner. I did that. I built a t-shirt company and I'm now a victim of my own success, right? Like I've got chaotic operations. My systems are not there. My people aren't happy. They're frustrated. My processes are broken and I don't have the right tools in place. How could you help me if I were to say, hire you and bring you into the company and say, please help me? What's that look like?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I use 3 phases when I do any sort of work. And it's the same that a mechanic would use. It's the same that a surgeon would use. It's the same that anybody uses to really understand what the problem is. And the first is discovery, right? To really get in and figure out what the issue is. And it's really looking within the operations and with the organizations and discovering what is the current state. It's current state mapping is really the easiest way to put it. And then a design, right? Working with the organization, not always the leader or not always the person who brought me in. It's the people who are actually doing the work to understand, how does the work flow? How are operations run? And how can we improve that? And then a real collaborative third phase, which is implementation. All it is testing, right? You try something, you test it. If it works, you improve upon it. If it doesn't work, it's no harm, right? You get rid of it and try something new. So it's really an iterative process. And what I like to tell people is that when you're engaged in some sort of a process improvement, process design engagement, that today is the worst your company processes will ever be. And tomorrow when you wake up, that day is the worst it'll ever be, because you are constantly improving and making little tweaks, right? You can change something 10% all at once, or you can do 1% every single day. And those 1% adjustments are really where you move the needle.
I love the way you just described that. You can change something 10%, which is hard. But if you change 1% in 10 days, you've improved 10%. Just 1% a day. You can do 1%.
Exactly.
And that makes it much more achievable. I bet there's also, too, when I think about that, and I think about the people you help, the way you described that 3-phased approach, I'm sure you've had some folks that have done remarkably well with your service and some who haven't done as well. What's the difference between people who really get the most out of your help and others that don't? What do I need to do to make sure I get the most out of it?
Well, what you need to do to make sure you get the most out of it is really a couple things. The main thing is you as the business owner. If I was going to come in and work with you on this fictional t-shirt company that we just made up, right? You have to be open to the change, right? I'm not a magician, and I don't think that any business consultant is one. I can't come in and say, I'm going to sprinkle some Lean or Six Sigma or whatever methodology we want to use, and it makes things better. You have to be open to the change, and you have to be open to the fact that I am coming in as a partner, as a trusted partner who's going to tell you your baby's ugly, right? So that's okay, right? That's what I'm there for. And then you have to be willing to open yourself up to new ideas, new possibilities, and allow things to change. Because again, in this analogy we're using, you didn't come into the company to do finance, right? So you shouldn't be in love with any of your finance processes. Be in love with your creative process. That's awesome. I'm not going to mess with that. Let me help with the areas that you are not the best at.
I love that. And the whole idea of staying in the area that you're best at is something I don't think people get enough credit for. Because like you said, we didn't get into business to do finance or to do accounting. or to run manufacturing, or even for a lot of people to run the operations. They got into business because they saw a need or a problem that they could solve with their product or service, and they provided it to a specific type of customer that has that problem. And so the way I always describe it is, if you are not doing that thing, you are actually hurting your business, because there's no one else in your business that can do the things that you do. So if you're doing anything else that you can hire someone else for, whether that's ops or accounting, whatever, you're hurting your business. It's not just I could be doing better, and you're actively hurting it. And so somebody like yourself who can go and help somebody stay in that zone of genius, that area that they're good at, it's invaluable.
No, I think another way to look at it is, if you look at a baseball team, and I think that that it's a great way to look at it. I'm in Colorado, right? So the Colorado Rockies, if we look at the professional baseball team, they all have their specialties. Every single person on that team is an amazing athlete, echelons above anything I could ever dream to be, right? But they all know where they contribute to that team and the importance of the team. So your relief pitcher who pitches 1 every 4 games, right, isn't going to go and try and hit a home run. Same thing, your home run hitter knows that they're not going to go to the mound when it's, in the 9th inning. So I think it's very important for people to understand, where is that zone of genius that you talked about? Where is that, and where can they best contribute, and then rely on others for that other part.
And then if I'm somebody I'm listening to this, I'm like, I wonder if he can help me though, right? Is there a specific group that's like ideal for what you do? Like, or do you help any niche, any operation? Or is there somewhere where you're like, man, if you show up day one, I can knock it out of the park for you?
Yeah. So honestly, the type of company, I've always said, doesn't matter as much, like the product or service that you are selling. So I've worked with anything from cosmetics companies to big manufacturers to nonprofits to podcast companies. And what's interesting to me is there's an input and there's an output, and I love the thing in between. So whether that input or output is digital, whether it's a physical product or whether it's an idea, I can work within that. Now the niche though is, where are you in your company's life cycle, and what problems are you having? And really what we're trying to figure out is those companies that the owner or key leader realizes that they need help, right? Their glove box does not work as a filing cabinet anymore, right? And that, maybe they aren't a QuickBooks genius, and there's all those sorts of issues that they're working through. That's kind of where I come in and am able to help best. Or those companies that they're like, all right, I have hit a wall, and this wall is keeping me from the growth that I know I can achieve.
Love it. And then do you have any examples? I'm sure there's some people that you've helped that just knocked out of the park. Do you have any examples of somebody who was literally, like you said, the what was that with the drawer, that analogy you made? You said their junk drawer is full.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. They're using actually their glove boxes. They're
using their glove box.
Yep. Using their glove box as a filing cabinet, right? Because they're going around with sales calls all the time, and they just shove it in there.
Oh, I love that. Where they went from that to where they're now living the laptop lifestyle, or whatever transformation that they were looking for happened.
Yeah. So one of them in particular that I really like, and I've really enjoyed the relationship that I've had with this organization, is it was a small organization servicing a very niche area. It's a service organization. So, but what I think the biggest thing that was with this organization was their willingness to grow and to learn. So they went from around 300,000 a year in revenue. In less than 3 years, they jumped up to 3 million a year, right, in revenue. They went from essentially the director of the organization and one quasi admin assistant who was also running programs, who was also running their marketing, right? And this person was not trained in really any of those. So working with them and working with that organization to understand what the problems were, how they could solve them. And one of the biggest things is getting that director to work within her zone of genius and realizing that, hey, she's not good at making PowerPoints for sales, but guess what? There's somebody on Fiverr that is, and it's cheap, right? So there were all those resources that they weren't using, and getting the people to really get within their zone and where they're good at. They've got a full-time salesperson now who is outrunning their operations. I mean, the salesperson is knocking it out of the park. They've got full-time admin, full-time program. All these sorts of things have really just expanded. And the company has grown 3 times in the last 3 years, all because they were open to change, open to understanding what their strengths were, where they can really improve.
That's huge, huge results. And then
Yep.
how did you help accomplish that? Help them figure that out?
So this relationship was interesting because it was really a coaching relationship. I worked as
Hmm.
a trusted partner and as an executive coach with this director and really helped her understand where those problems were. And we would go into every single session with our plan. We're going to talk about A, B, and C. And we would almost get to A every single session. And she'd say, I've got this thing I'm really working on. I've got this issue I want to get your thoughts on. And we'd spend an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours over coffee understanding what this problem was and really getting to it. And then over time, we saw just this huge revolution in the organization. Now, another example that I think is
Hmm.
really interesting is really getting into the guts of an organization and understanding where their issues were. And this was a manufacturing company that I worked with. Again, great organization, was just on the cusp of really knocking it out of the park. And what we found was they were not able to keep up with demand. They had an amazing product, amazing marketing, but they just couldn't keep their operations up with demand. So it was kind of fun. We ordered their product the night before, knowing nobody was in the office, and we beat everybody in the office the next morning and physically watched the person who processes the orders go and get the order and print it off and then take it to the next person. And I followed this order all the way through the manufacturing process. And each time I would ask, hey, what are you doing with this? Why do you have this? And ask those questions, right? And it was great.
Hmm.
So when the guy printed off the first set of orders, it was, oh, the next two people in the process need these pieces of paper. So I followed the pieces of paper to the next two people in the processes. Oh no, the guy before me needs this. That's why he prints it off, right? And it was a
Hmm.
whole lot of that over and over and over again, really just a misunderstanding at those touch points. Everybody in their individual job and how they did their job was outstanding, but those touch points is where the trouble was. And what was funny is I followed it all the way through till I got to the accountant. And I said to the accountant, I said, okay, what do you do with this packet that is now like 8 or 9 pages thick, stapled together? And she said, I put
Right.
them in the filing cabinet over there. It's like, when do you touch them? Never. Right.
Mm.
So a lot of it was just straight up traditional, easy to identify waste within the system, and waste isn't defined within the lean world, right? But just following it through the process and understanding where their issues were and helping them streamline that. And they've moved facilities twice then. They're just huge, blown up all over the country as far as their product, which is a very niche product but high demand. And it's been a lot of fun watching them grow and learn as an organization.
That's that's fun. It's fun to look back and see the wins, right? Like
It
if they
is.
were here now, either of those two, like how do you think they would describe? Like if I were like, hey, tell me about Ryan Wolf and what he did for you guys, how would they describe it? You think?
Well, yeah, I think that the relationship for both of those, I think, was fun because it was collaborative and it was open and it was all of us exploring the possibilities together. I think honestly, both organizations and sets of leadership and associates that I worked with, we had a lot of fun, right? So that's part of it,
Yeah.
is that we got in there together. I didn't come in and say, hey, corporate hired me. I'm here to fix your problems. Just listen. It was a collaborative effort. And then the other thing is, I think that they would describe is that not only was it fun, it was just engaging and really stimulating everyone, including myself, stimulating parts of our brain that we wouldn't normally use throughout our everyday process to think about it end to end. Pulling somebody off a factory floor and saying, do you realize how many pieces of X or how many widgets you produced last month? Like, nope, nobody's ever told me. It's like, it was this many. I'm like, whoa, I didn't know I
Hmm.
could do 10,000 of those. It's like, I bet you can do 12,000 and you're going to show me how. So I think that they would describe it as a collaborative process in which is very enlightening for everyone involved.
Nice. So then if I was like, look, I'm ready, I'm listening to this, I want to hire this guy, I need the help that he could provide, how would I do that?
So 2 ways, right? So, well, it's a 2-step process. First, very simple. You will go to probably what is the worst website you've ever seen, but it's Spartan 36, the numbers 36solutions.com. So Spartan36solutions.com. You can email me through that. And then I love having conversations. So it's a Zoom call we'll have with an owner, and we really discuss the problems. And I always tell everyone that I ever meet with, if you buy from me or not, I don't care. What I want to do is see your business succeed. So if we decide that a relationship isn't the best thing at the time, as far as an actual transactional relationship, what is always open is a personal relationship where we can bounce ideas off each other, right? So if you have a quick question, we can always jump on a Zoom call or a text or an email or whatever it is to figure out that problem if the timing isn't right for an actual full scale engagement.
Okay. And then sometimes there's some folks out there that think, hey, look, I know this guy can help me. I know I've got the trouble, but I don't need to do it right now. Is there anything you would help convince me that, you know what? Yeah, you need to do this right now. Don't wait.
Yeah, I grew up in a really old house, right? Like saw cut timber, open wiring old house. And you can do one of two things when you have an old house. You can either tear out the walls, replace the wiring, replace the plumbing, and fix it the right way, and it will last you forever. Or you can take Band-Aids and old gum and you can patch up all the plumbing at that point, right? At some point, you can no longer handle all of the Band-Aids on everything, and it's gonna be a mess. So I always say to people, if you do it right the first time, you can exponentially scale. If you fix a single problem at a time, then you are only going to fix that one problem and then come back and fix it again, and then come back and fix it again. So it's a difference between linear or exponential scaling.
And so if I'm like, look, I know I need to do this. I work with Spartan, so the 36 solutions, and I know I need to do it now, but I just don't want to pay for this. I don't know if it's in the budget. I don't know if, it just seems like another expense. How would you help me get over that question?
Well, I'd go back
Is
to
it
what
worth
we
it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would go back to what you said at the very beginning of our conversation, the difference between a pain pill and a vitamin, right?
Mhm.
Everybody can always look back and say, I probably should have invested in those vitamins because I would have spent a lot less money on these pain pills, right? So I am not selling a pain pill. I'm not selling a quick fix. What I'm selling is something that will help, or what I'm offering is something that will help keep your company, not just afloat, help exponential growth for your company, because that is what is important, the ability to scale exponentially beyond what just an owner or a sole proprietor is able to do on their own. So I think that the important part, or the real value of investing in this early, is you're investing a small amount early as opposed to investing a lot later. And that a lot later may not come in the form of you paying a consultant or somebody to come in, but what it will come in the form of is lost sales, lost productivity, and really undue stress on an owner and or principal within an organization.
Love it. Now you've been considering, like, this is something you've been doing for years now, and you've seen some changes. I'm wondering, is there anything that you think that you've learned as an entrepreneur that has actually changed you as a person? Like being an entrepreneur in business and in profession, has it changed you as a person? You
Oh,
think?
very much so. Very much so.
Mm.
I'm a father of three, right? So what I've learned, actually, I've learned to become a better parent because of what I do with companies. And you and I have a long history, an old history in the military. And you come out of being, somebody in the military, you just say jump, and people don't ask how high, they jump, right?
Hmm.
It's what's supposed to be done. But then you come in as an entrepreneur, and working with other entrepreneurs, you have to have patience because things are done in a different way. You have to use more of the expert leadership or referent leadership as opposed to legitimate. And the reason behind that is, again, you can't push a string, right? So it has made me a much more patient parent. It's made me a much, I think, better person overall because I can see that while all organizations are different and all people are different, we all are struggling on the inside with something. And how can
Mm.
we then help everyone succeed? I don't believe that business or life is a zero sum game, right? I believe that the whole true nature of our setup and of capitalism is that there's enough for everyone. The pie is big enough for everyone, and the pie will continue to grow. So if we all work together to solve all of these problems, I'm going to get mine, you're going to get yours. Everybody has an opportunity. As long as everybody has an opportunity, we can all do better. It's just providing that access to the opportunities, both in life and in business, and helping with whatever our skill set is.
Hmm. And then here's a big question. If you were not an entrepreneur, let me say this. If you're no longer an entrepreneur, would you go back to doing the same job or a different job or any job at all?
So assuming that money is an issue, right? Because we all have bills to pay and a mortgage. My dream job is to be to do operations, strategic operations for the Denver Zoo. And here's why, right? I love strategic operations. I think that no matter what when I volunteer and in nonprofits I work with, I work with organizations, even I say, I can volunteer, I can help you, but I want to help you inside your organization. So I still love that even in my off time. So if I could work for an organization whose mission I believe in, who I think is out there doing good work in an operation strategy type role, a strat ops or chief of staff or whatever it is, I think that is what I want to do. That's my dream job.
Wow. I never would have guessed that.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine like on your lunch break, you go out and you have your lunch watching lions? I can't think of a better job.
Jeez, that is awesome. Would you consider yourself an animal lover then?
I am. Yeah. I'm an animal lover. And I love not just, I have a small zoo at our house, right? We have a lot of pets, but for some reason, I've just always been attracted to these big wild animals and always wondering what it would have been like before we were here. Again, I live in Colorado. So I look across the plains and I think, what would this have looked like with 4 million buffalo coming across? So I think I think that the natural ecosystem of things is fascinating. And yeah, so animal lover, love all kinds. And I think it's super fascinating.
I did not know that about you. That's
I
really
didn't
cool.
either. It's something I realized.
Nice. And so what else then? So what other hidden gems are there about Ryan Woolf? Other things that we wouldn't know necessarily that's just interesting, that's different.
Something else that's super interesting and I'm very proud of is my oldest child got into the band, right? I grew up doing sports, zero musical talent in my family whatsoever. Same thing for my wife, Mindy, knows no musical talent, right? Doing sports and everything. And our oldest got into the band and then got into playing the flute, and her high school band is outstanding. They actually went to the national competition this year. Something I didn't know, there was even national competition for the band. So we traveled to the national competitions, the Grand Nationals, and we're walking into the NFL stadium that is being held in. And I realize I'm getting butterflies, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so pumped for this. So I have become an all-in band dad. That's my thing now. I absolutely love it. We would stay even and watch these other bands of high school kids throughout the country play. And my wife and I are sitting there going, what happened? How did we do this? Shh, the next one's coming on. Let's watch them. It's crazy. Never would have thought it.
Oh, that's awesome. Man. Yeah. I don't even know what to say. That's really cool.
I did not know that about it is just outstanding watching these kids go out and perform and just getting excited and knowing all the hard work. So to get to that level though, they're out there, like we would do, 3-a-day football practices or basketball or whatever it was. They're out there doing the same thing for band all day long on the asphalt. And I drive by going, ooh, that looks terrible.
Out there sweating.
It is.
But I feel like that's one of the hidden joys you don't learn about until you actually jump in. It's a fatherhood. You're a father and you get to experience these things.
Yeah. You learn so much. You learn so much just about yourself, about others, about everything. And I realized how little I know about the world just when I watch my children.
And so then another thought would be, or question would be, something that you wish more people asked you about. Is there anything like that where it's just like, I know these are things that people don't know about me, but man, I wish people asked me more about this because it excites me.
Oh, wow. So that's a great question. I get asked a lot about, and I'm sure you do too, about your service and where you are and what you did and all that sort of stuff, right? I wish people would ask about who I met and who I got
Hmm.
to know throughout all of that. I mean, our connection, I think, is a great example of that. We would have never met had we not physically been together in college and then in the service, and really the friendships and bonds that have lasted from that. So I look back, I wish I could share more of the people that I've had the privilege of knowing and that I've been blessed with having in my life, less of what I've done, where I've been, and what I've seen. I think that is the most important gift that I have been given, that I wish that I could give to others, is just not the experiences, but the people that I've been able to be around.
Nice. Do any come to mind in particular?
Yes, a lot of them from everywhere. I think that one of the people that I really got to know and work with and become a close friend with, who sadly passed, was killed in action in Iraq. But
Mm.
his name was Matthew Taylor, and he was a young enlisted soldier when I was a platoon leader, when I was a young lieutenant and captain, and a guy I got to know. And what was interesting about him is he was the guy that would smile, and it's raining on you and you're in the mud and you haven't eaten and you're cold, and somehow you're laughing and you don't know why. And it's just that guy would would brighten. They say, oh, he brightens every room. He really did, but it was with his sense of humor and the way he was around. And he was really good as an infantry squad leader. I mean, it was just great watching the guy. So meeting and knowing him, and there's other people too. Somebody who we mutually know recently that I wouldn't have known otherwise is a lady named Charlinda Scales. Right, Charlinda is an Air Force veteran, runs an amazing organization and nonprofit out of Dayton, Ohio, called Mutt Sauce. I brag about you all the time, like, oh, my buddy Emmanuel, he's got this cool company and all this stuff going on. And I think that it's just, again, the people and getting to know these people and where they are and what they're doing. One more person I'll mention, actually, that I've gotten to know and carried on a relationship throughout my time in the service, is Garrett Cathcart. And he was our classmate at West Point. He had one of the most fascinating military careers. And then afterwards, after he got out of the military, he has just dedicated his life to service and to helping others. And he's one of those guys you look at and you could either be, a general officer one day or a multimillionaire in business, but yet you have decided to serve others. And I think that he motivates me to go out and be a better person, as well as so many other people that we've gotten to know throughout our time.
Hmm. And one of the things we talk about, you're right, like we've got a lot in common in terms of people that we know, especially in the business world. It becomes a very small community. But one of the things that's been fascinating me, I've been talking with a lot of veterans, obviously, but also veterans who are creators, right, who are publishing content. I know you've published content before too. I'm curious, do you publish online still? And if so, where can I find some of your content if I'm a listener?
So I will be putting it back up soon. I write, right? That's how I process thoughts and things, as I do a lot of writing. Tried to get into video a little bit. I'm putting it back up. So again, go back up to Spartan 36 Solutions, and then we'll have redirects there at some point. But yeah, the veteran content, who would have thought, right? So many creative people have come out of that place and finding their voice through different creative mediums. As far as creating things and just content creating, my wife, who again is a veteran, is an outstanding painter, and we started putting her art up for other people to consume and to share with. So if it's video, if it's paint, if it's writing, I encourage everyone. And you're talking to the guy who literally took a personality test one time, and my score came out as a 1 out of 99 under art, right? Try to express yourself in some way, one way or the other. And again, I do mine through writing, and I write on business topics as well as some other topics, but I will have it back up on my website soon. So if you're a listener, go out and check it out and we'll have it up there soon.
I'd love to go deep on this for a second, especially because where we come from, this is not a valued skill set, right? And in some cases, it's also detrimental to the mission if you have people being creative on their own time, doing their own thing, right? And not essentially falling in line and following instructions and doing as they're told. Do you see, though, that there's benefit to expressing that creativity?
Oh, I think very much. I think there's so much benefit to expressing any sort of creativity. And creativity doesn't have to be, I'm going to go and sit down with my thoughts and paint a bird, right? Creativity can be in any aspect. And what I think creativity does is it gets you out of your mindset of, I am focused on accomplishing task A, B, and C. Creativity works in a completely different way in which you have to think about topics, processes of the world, whatever they are, in a different way, and you hit it at a different angle. So a lot of people throw around the phrase, think outside the box all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's good to think outside the box. I do, however, think that first you got to know what's inside the box, right? Because if you don't know what's inside the box, then you can't think outside of it. So thinking out or knowing what's inside of the box is essential. It is core to being whatever or whomever you're going to be. But once you know what's inside the box, then you can attack problems creatively outside of that box.
Yeah, I've started doing more creative things like you described. Like I used to get so nervous about putting stuff out there. It's almost like you think about creativity like in school, like I'm going to get a grade. Someone's going to grade me. I've almost been finding like the idea to be able to just express for the sake of expression is basically pretty liberating. It's comforting to just be like, look, there's no grade. There's no one watching this. I've even heard of this concept. I don't know if you've seen these, but this idea of burn books, right?
Yes.
It's like a journal, but on steroids, right? Where you just literally write whatever's in your mind and you just go burn the pages at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think it's interesting. What's interesting too is the concept you just mentioned actually. So burn books, right? Go off of things like journaling. I have tried so many times to get into that and can't get into journaling. But what I can get into is wrapping my head around a complex problem and trying to simplify it as much as possible, right? I love blog format. And the reason I love blog format is you're not going to get a reader for more than 3 to 5 minutes. Right, on a blog. So how can you express this complex problem, distill it down to the nuts and bolts of it, and really get it out there for people to understand in a short manner? And it really makes you think about things. Instead of saying, I'm going to write a 300-page book, I'm going to write a 500-page blog article on the same topic. That takes actually some skill to figure out how do I distill it that much.
Yeah, there's that old saying where it's like, what did he say? He said, "I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have I didn't have enough time."
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Nope. That's great.
Yeah, being concise is harder. And another phrase that I heard that I loved was, writing is not writing. Writing is rewriting. Right. And this idea of just get it out on the page. I love how you're describing for blogging, right? Because for a lot of people, you have ideas in your head and they just bounce around in your head. And as soon as you try and communicate them, and this is where a lot of people get stuck not putting out content. As soon as you try to communicate them, you're just blah, word vomiting. And it's, you lose people and then you start to get discouraged and it becomes a spiral of I'm not a good communicator. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not a good writer. I'm not a good whatever. But I like what you're saying there because in essence, what being concise allows you to having that short 3 to 5 minutes worth of content, a couple hundred words, it forces you almost to think critically about what you're doing, right? Like okay, I know I have to say all these things I want to say, but what do I actually need to say? I think that's pretty powerful, man.
Yeah,
More people should do it. Or people should pick up blogging. Blogging, I think also this TikTok generation. Have you stumbled into the TikTok side of things too? Because that even forces you to be even more concise.
It does. I haven't gotten on TikTok yet, mainly because I don't think that, again, as a father, my children will want me on TikTok. But I do love watching like YouTube shorts and Instagram
Shorts,
reels
yes.
or any of that sort of stuff. But yeah, getting a message out in such a short span of time is so interesting. It can't be easy to do.
I love that. I think I interrupted you when you were saying that, but your kids don't want you on TikTok. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I just being a TikTok
So,
dad, I don't think is where they would want me. Yeah. You
so
know,
they don't want you, their friends seeing you is what you're
the last
saying?
thing a freshman in high school wants is somebody to be like, "Hey, I saw your dad on TikTok last night."
That's one reason not to do it. Yeah, but your dad was on TikTok last night talking about such and such. You can
Yeah.
imagine them in class quoting your kids. Do you have so part of the reason to push out content is people actually will read it, right? And putting out content.
Mhm.
Do you have folks that you've seen or gotten to know where it's like, hey, these people are my raving fans?
You know, content wise, I haven't. But what I have seen, unless my mom counts, right? She likes
Yeah, she
everything I do.
counts. Absolutely.
But really, I think business wise, fans, I think it's an interesting thing to look at. And I would
Mhm.
say my fans are people that I would say I get referrals from and
Mm.
who keep coming back to the well, right? Who keep coming back and saying, "Oh, I think you should talk to this person," or my favorite is when I get an email out of nowhere and it says, "Hey, you were recommended by this person." So I think that is the best thing that I could ever get. And what I would hear from fans is, "Hey, this person pointed you out or recommended you. They said you were somebody I could talk to." Now, my content, I haven't gotten there far yet. And part of it is what we talked about earlier, where it's that, oh, I don't want to put that out there for the world to see. I've taken things down, right? I've had things up and I'm like, oh, I don't feel comfortable having this up anymore. I go back into my shell, right? Saying I'm an imposter. I'm not good enough. The world doesn't want to see my stuff. Right. So
Mm.
actually having this conversation is making me realize that even if nobody sees it, right? It's that courage of putting it out there is what's important.
Yeah, that's literally what I was going to ask you next. Like, it's because I do see the argument because obviously I'm very biased towards putting out content. I'm
Mhm.
trying to start a media company. I'm trying to push out content and help others do the same. I feel that, but at the same time, I am respectful of the hesitation. Right?
Mhm.
Like it's not an easy thing to put yourself out there on social media, to put yourself out there on a blog, to put yourself out there on video, especially. And I'm just curious if you can kind of talk me through like what is that feeling for you that where you're like, I need to take this down or I need to not post or like where does that come from and how do you feel about it?
It's a couple things. First off, the feeling itself is twofold. One is terrifying for me, right? Just
Mm,
because it's not something that I've ever done is put myself out in front of others in a creative way, in a vulnerable way, right? Vulnerability is hard. I think another part of it too is I've had things ingrained in me that really is I am here as a leader. It's not about me. It's about those that I lead. And it's about the overall success of the organization. Right? So even as a consultant, when I'm working with others, oh, I didn't achieve these results. I helped them achieve the results or whatever it is. I don't like to put me out in front. I don't really like to have the focus on me, and I'm very uncomfortable with that. So I think that's where it comes from, where I'll get the courage to put something out there. And then I'll be like, oh, it's about me. Maybe I can not, I have a pseudonym I've used, right? Maybe I can pull, I can pull that down and not have it be about me anymore. So I think that it's just really it's more internal, right? And maybe it's some inward looking, maybe some blogging I need to do about it, right? To understand really why I don't want to put myself out there. Why I have that imposter syndrome when it comes to my ideas and whether or not my ideas are worthy for consumption by others.
and trust me, you're not alone. I hear that all the time. Like literally, I'll go on shoots and watch grown men like cuss me out because they're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. And they'll walk out of the room. Like, but you hired me to be here. You wanted me to make this for you. And it's just like I see now that it is actually a widespread problem. Like, from where's this fear of making content come from? I think it's a lot of what you said, right? It's I'm basically putting myself out there to be judged. And who am I to tell others what to do or to say other things or to put out content or to be so brazen and uh, conceited as to think someone will want to listen to my content? Mhm.
Yeah, so I've talked about this in other forums with some groups that I work with nonprofit groups and everything. But what's interesting is I like to use Plato's allegory of the cave. Right. So this is going to be, really getting philosophical with some of this stuff. But if you'll remember in Plato's cave, people
Hmm.
are in this cave, right? And they can only look forward and they only see shadows of what is presented to them on the wall. Right. So that has become their reality. So their reality is the things that are on the wall. Now, when they come out of the cave and they see things for what they are, what the rest of us would consider reality, they have a choice to make. Their choice is to understand their new reality or come to realize that they don't understand their new reality and to be vulnerable with that and to realize that everything they knew up until that point may not be true and may not be correct and to learn from that. Or they can do the easier thing, which is go back into the cave, go back into their old reality and stay there, right? So putting yourself out there is like leaving Plato's cave. It's understanding that it's scary out there. The things may not be as what you thought they were, but it's real and it's raw and it's emotional and it is vulnerable, but it is real life as opposed to living inside the cave.
I love that. And it's the idea of like change only happens when the pain of staying the same is, or of changing is outweighed by the pain of staying the same. Right. So it hurts me to be in this position. I want to get out of the cave. And so even in that sense, we're talking here about content creation and putting yourself out there in a content way. Is there benefit to putting yourself out there? Because then maybe that could, the right now the pain is I don't want to put myself out there. I'm scared.
Mhm.
I'm not, maybe not even scared. It's just I feel uncomfortable. And it's comfortable not putting myself out there. So how do we get to where not putting myself out there is more painful and it's more uncomfortable than just let me just do it. Let me put myself out
Yeah.
there. What's some benefits that, if any,
You,
and there may not be any.
Yeah, I think if we're just going to talk benefits, especially for small to medium sized companies, which is kind of my niche where I work within, is I don't buy products, I buy people. I don't buy
Mm,
services, I buy people, right? So
mm,
you may have the best widget on earth, right? But if don't have a personal connection to it, I won't buy it. So something that's interesting. I used to work in the insurance industry, big corporate insurance industry, right? People they would go and buy car insurance or they would go and buy auto insurance, but they would stay with their insurance agent, which is kind of counterintuitive because we think we make purchases online today through any resource and we get it and it's cheaper and it comes faster and it's not personal, right? It shows up to my door and then I go pick it up. But what's interesting is that long-term value is a personal thing. A long-term relationship with a person or a company is more personal. So if you have whatever it is that you have and you put yourself out there as a person saying, this is me, this is my product or service, this is why I sell it, and this is why it's passionate to me, I may have a more personal connection with you. And oh, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and use your service for it.
And this is something that is so profound, and it's generations have known this, right? Sales people buy from people, right?
Mhm.
But what I think is radically shifting in this new day and age is you can do connection like that instead of one to one on the showroom floor at scale. Now,
Yes.
through the power of things like social media and digital advertising, you can reach people at in mass, hundreds of thousands of people, and they can feel that same connection to
Yes.
you, right? Just like
Yeah.
they were standing there in front of you in the sales store.
Yep. You may not ever meet the person, right? May not ever meet
Hmm.
them. They may not even know you exist. They're the creator may not even know you exist, but you still can have a personal connection because whatever it is that you say or do or the vibe you are putting out, they want to have that personal connection with you. So they're going to buy from you and they're going to
Yeah.
continue to have that long-term value.
Yeah. And I find it fascinating. Like ever since I started, like I've been hit or miss putting content out randomly. I haven't even done it as consistently as I should, but I'll have people jump on a sales call and they're quoting me to me. Right? Where they're
Mhm.
like, look, I watched that video you made about specifically Shopify, how to do this and how to do that. And I know you don't recommend this. However, I would like for you to do it. And I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, I had to try. Right. But it's hilarious to me that they showed up on the call and it's like they knew me. Right. Which can be uncomfortable at first, but it's the benefit of I don't have to spend time on that call with the whole building rapport, building trust, which are commonplace in the sales industry where you call someone or you take a sales call and you have to build rapport. That's already done, So I'm preaching to the choir here, but
Yeah.
I'm all in on content.
So it's really interesting. I've got a client that I've worked with who they're really interested in putting out content. Everything is produced very well, very professional. And what we're trying to tell them over and over again is that's great. And you should have some of that if you're able to. And I want you to pull out your phone while you're walking from the coffee shop to the office and say, hey, everybody, I just had this quick thought on whatever your quick thought was, and put it out there because it's raw and it's real and it's personal. That I think when we go back to the fireside chats over the radio, right? People would listen to fireside chats over the radio. And literally, they'd have their fire going in their home as well, because it was a personal, close connection to the message. And we just have our own version of that today. It doesn't have to be overly produced. It has to be real.
And there's been actual studies done and evidence proven that, the less produced things are, specifically if we're talking social media, right? If you're putting it out there where it's free and easy, right? It actually works better to not have it be highly produced because consumers are smart. Right. And viewers are smart. They know when they see what they're looking for is cat memes and posts from their friends. It's a social network. You go social media, go in there to be social, not to consume media. So they know when their friends are posting, it's not going to be a $40,000 production that person made to put this post out there. So if your post comes through highly produced, swipe, that's an ad. Swipe, that's an ad. And unfortunately, yours wasn't an ad. You just decided you were going to spend a ton of money producing it. So the inverse is also true. The less produced it is, the less resistance there is to watching your content. So you're spot on, man. Like I'm always about just grab the phone, record, and put it out there.
Interesting thing, a client that I was working with in the past, they were a television production company, right? So they have good production stuff. Their best creative that they had made throughout the whole cycle we were working together was a behind the scenes of how they produce their television ads. And it was them with like some of the props playing around, right? That gained more traction by magnitudes than any other that they had done. And it was a behind the scenes of them playing around with commercial props.
Because it's real. It's authentic. It's interesting. Real. Yeah. Anyway, we could talk for days about content, but I'm curious, getting back to you, you're the star of the show today. So I'm curious, stories, things that you've solved. I'm sure in the ops world, there's all kinds of stuff that you've had to deal with. Are there any particular problems or challenges that you've had to solve that you're most proud of?
So this actually most proud of it. And I think that this is really interesting. This was my first foray into process improvement before I even knew what it was. And this goes back to actually when I was still in the service, when I was still in the military. This is my crowning achievement was my first one. And the reason for that is there was purpose behind it. As you know, and probably a lot of the listeners of this podcast would know, when you come back after being overseas, it's called redeploying. The process is terrible, right? You show up and you spend hours, doing paperwork, turning in your weapons and all that sort of stuff. Well, I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and the airport was about 45 minutes to an hour from where actually Fort Polk was. So everybody would fly in and spend 8 to 9 hours in Louisiana, an hour away from their family before they could even see them, doing all of this processing stuff. And I was like, man, we got to get this time down. We got to figure this out. And I was challenged by my boss, didn't know anything about how to do it, but challenged by my boss to get the time down. And we got the time down to less than around 2 hours, less than 3 hours, but around 2 hours to process a flight of people coming through. And I leveraged, system engineering skills, lean methodology without knowing what it was at the time. But that honestly is the proudest of what I was, because we reduced by 2/3 the time it took from a soldier to come from overseas until the time they saw their family, right? So that was process improvement for a purpose. And that process improvement really mattered in the lives of those people. So that's the one I was most proud of. But honestly, as I look back across the organizations that I've worked with, the ones that are out there thriving, the ones that are out there just just blowing up and having fun doing it. Those are, I think, are the ones that I'm most proud of. And seeing those organizations and those business owners, business executives, creators, whomever they are, enjoying themselves while making or doing what it is they set out to do. Because when I come and see them, a lot of times they aren't enjoying themselves. They come to me because they are just so stuck down or so down in the minutia and the mud of their business that they want to get out of it. And seeing them enjoying themselves again and doing what they got into doing, I think is really what I'm most proud of.
You should be proud, because in both of those examples, not everyone gets to do a job where they get to see the smiles on faces, to see people go from miserable to happy and achieve that transformation. It's got to be rewarding to do what you do. You got to
It
feel
is.
good.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. And also there's heartbreak, right? There's not every day is unicorns and rainbows, right? There are many days that or many clients that I've worked with that were hoping for the magic wand, right? Because they knew that there was a problem somewhere in their company, a company that they created, a company that they were instrumental in making, right? But yet they weren't part of the problem, right? That it was someone else. And while I understand that mentality, it's important when you are an owner, when you are a creator, when you are a leader, when you are whomever you are in your company, you've got to look inward. If you're going to have somebody come in and look inward in the company, you've got to be able to look inward on yourself. And that's what I found that things haven't worked, is when the person is like, the problem isn't me, right? I had nothing to do with this problem that I created.
A lack of accountability and responsibility.
Yes. Yep.
It's not my fault.
Exactly. It's not my fault. I hired this person who didn't do it right. Well, where did they learn how to do it?
Where do you think that comes from? I've seen that also, and I wonder about that too. And actually, to be honest, I've been guilty of that myself at times. It's everyone else's fault. Is that something? Is that like, where would that come from? Like, why do we do that? I almost feel like that probably is a natural tendency as entrepreneurs. And I'm just curious if you think, can we help people identify that in their own business, in their own way they operate their business for themselves?
Yeah. You know, what I tell people a lot when I'm working with them is say, your systems and processes, whether they're documented or not, exist. Everybody has them. And when you put together whatever it was, when you put together whatever process in place, whatever procedure, however that system was done, whether it happened organically or whether it was thought, it was a good intention. It made sense at the time. And at the time, it was the right decision to make. You outgrew that. And that is okay. I think people have a potential of thinking when we say, hey, here's an issue in which we can improve, which we can do better. We're telling them that they were wrong. Or what they're hearing is that when they did that, they were wrong, right? Yeah. Using your glove box as a filing cabinet, if you're out making sales calls, that makes a lot of sense. That's a great idea. It's a secure location. Things aren't going to fall apart, right? And when it works fine until it doesn't. And when it doesn't mean that what you did yesterday was wrong. And I think that's important to communicate with folks, is that they are not wrong for what has happened in the past. They are, however, in control of what happens in the future.
Oh God, I love that. You just gave so much freedom, to just release that pressure.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You weren't wrong. When you put together that decision, when we look at it today, it looks kind of silly, right? It doesn't make sense. It's inefficient, whatever we want to say or whatever bucket or category that falls in. But when you put that process in place, when you made that decision, when you started doing things, whatever way they're done, it made sense at the time, and it was the right move.
That's so liberating, because I almost feel like I want to shout sometimes, either to other people or even to myself, you are not your business, right? Yes. I feel like we mesh our identity because you have to birth this thing. It takes so much of you. You almost start to identify, not necessarily that I'm Emmanuel Alea, but I am Alea Systems. I am my business, and I are one. My business is me, and I am my business, and everything that the business does is a reflection of me, right? Especially when you put your name on your business, you're like, it's actually my name on my business. We start to look at every failure as I'm a failure. Every win potentially is I'm a win. And that identification, you start to lose yourself a little bit, and it can be frustrating, and it can actually be debilitating and remove you from making those conscious decisions that need to happen, where it's like, look, the business isn't doing well right now, but I'm still a good human being. I'm okay. Or this process that I put in place failed. I can cut it off and let it go. And I'm not cutting off an arm or cutting off a piece of me. It's not a reflection of me as a human being, and I can be okay. You know,
Yep.
we need more people like Ryan Woolf in our life.
Yeah,
to explain
I
that
think
to
a
us.
great example, if you want to look at like a big company that's doing great, that has done an amazing job transforming over the years with multiple hiccups, is 3M, right? Look at 3M, the sticky note people, right? They're making tape, sticky notes and all that. They were a mining company, a manufacturing and mining company. I think the 3Ms are Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. Someone can please correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't start off making sticky notes, right? They didn't start off making adhesives. And if you went to the founders of that organization when it started, over 100 years ago, and said that, hey, your mining equipment is not going to be your future, right? They probably wouldn't like that, and they probably would be insulted by it. But it's okay to evolve and to change and to grow as an organization. Take the good, get rid of the bad, and continue to move forward.
Love it. Love it. I feel like, too, we get stuck on myths, right? Just like what we've been talking about, that I am my business. My business is me. What I created is right. And therefore, if anything presents itself to prove to me that's wrong, whether it's the market, new employees, new systems, then I as a person am a failure and I'm wrong. And that's a myth. Are there other myths that you've seen in doing the work that you do that people hang on to that are just holding them back?
Ooh, that's a great question. Myths that people hang on to that are holding them back. I think that two things. One is one of the things we just talked about is that if anything changes compared to how it was done, or anybody suggested something new, that I was wrong, right? I think that's one of the major myths. And then the other myth, I think that a lot of companies or individual senior leaders have within companies is that they have to be right all the time, right? I saw a thing a while back, super interesting. It was a principle that essentially is leaders are always right. And I take the opposite view, is leaders are always wrong, right? You make the best decision with the information that you have at the time and you move forward, and that's okay, right? But there is always somebody out there who has a better answer than me. And it's my job then to go and figure that out. So I think that people believe that if their name's on the company, right, or if they're the one who started it, that they have to have all the answers. And they don't, right? They won't have all the answers. And it's an unrealistic expectation that they put on themselves, that they are the end all be all of their organization.
I love that. It's such a relief. You can remove the pressure. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to do it all. You can hire people like yourself, right, to come in who has answers to questions that they probably don't even know they need to be asking, right? And so I'm curious about that. Like, how have you? This is going to be a question that seems weighty, but it'll make sense as you go through it. But how have you been significant to the small business industry, you and your business?
I think a couple things. So it's very weighty, right? That is a very weighty question. But I think one of it is I approach things with questions, not answers. And I think that that's important, right? If I came into your company, I don't know what it is that you do or how you do it or why you do it. And I will never be as good as you or better than you at that. And I don't want to be. Right? What I want to do is learn everything there is about your company, everything it is about how you do what it is that you do. And in that learning, we can work together to make it better. So I think that is one of the things that I try and bring is just not a spoonful, but a whole shovelful of humility and coming and saying, I don't know your job. I don't want to do your job better than you or tell you how to do it. What I want to do is learn together and have us try and figure this out. And honestly, that's one of the things that I that I hear a lot from clients and people I work with. It's like, wow, you really picked up on this whole process really quick. You know a lot about whatever it is we're working with. Have you done this before? And the answer is usually no, but I want to be invested in it. I want to learn as much as I can, and then we can go try and be successful together.
Nice. And then if I'm interested in getting your help, like you just described, like, why would I choose you over another company that does what you do?
Yeah. So
What
I think
makes you different?
yeah. What makes me different is a couple things. One is I have a breadth of experience behind me, right? So we were classically trained in leadership, right? In people, working with people. So I think that is the big thing. Every single business is people. So we were classically trained in that area and really understand the ins and outs of working with people and with leadership. I was also business wise, very well trained, in a lot of different organizations and how to do it. So I've got the training and the certificates and all that sort of stuff to back it, but that means nothing. What is most important is my ability to come in and work with individuals in an organization to understand what their problems are and start working on those problems using those 3 steps that I've talked about, which is the discovery, design, and implementation. I think that the discovery is the most important part because it is so personal, really getting to understand the why and the how things work the way they work. So that's why I would choose me over, say, a competitor or somebody who does something very similar to me, is because I want to know all there is to know about your business. And I want to become an integral part of understanding it, and then we can move forward together.
And what I like about you is you're also constant, not just requesting that your clients innovate and be willing to change, but you yourself are innovating and changing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also changing even how you've built your own business.
I very much so. I went into, when I started the business consulting, I had a mindset, an understanding of what I thought it was going to be. And then what I understood though was that people needed something else. Like we talked about the whole Band-Aid or the whole vitamin painkillers, right? So I went into all of this thinking what I knew people needed, right? And then I learned through time and started to understand what organizations need. And I'm continuing to evolve that today. And as we've talked about in the past, there's the process improvement side, there's the nuts and bolts of how an organization works, and then there's the coaching side of it. So I'm working today on building out a whole coaching side of my company that really works on the Socratic method of asking questions and helping people come to the solutions that they have inside them. They just need help getting them out.
And if I'm trying to decide between the consulting package and the coaching package, what's the differences between the two?
Yeah, so I think the differences between the two are twofold. One is no matter which package you go with, you're buying or paying for me, right? It's the approach at which I bring at it. So if I am going to coach, it is a personal relationship that I'm engaging in which we are going down a journey together with, say, an individual in an organization. If the consulting package is a little different, in that consulting, I am looking at the organization as a whole, not necessarily a person's role within that organization. So a great way to look at it is, as a sales leader in an organization, do you need help as a sales leader in an organization understanding where you fit in, how things are going with your organization, and how to bring along people with you as a leader? Or do you need help with your order to cash process? If you need help with your order to cash process, that's a business consulting engagement. If you need help with you as an executive in an organization, well, that's a business coaching engagement.
It's almost like these ideas of I'm the executive and I'm supposed to know everything, right? And I feel frustrated when I'm in front of my people and I don't want them to know I don't know everything, but I can hire people to do things, but who am I going to hire to help me know more things? Right. And it's almost like the consulting is like, I can bring you on and ask you for your help to do things and fix things in my business. But with the coaching, I'm asking you to impart new knowledge for me to level up as a business leader. Would that be a way to distinguish?
That's a great way to distinguish it. And there's always the saying we've heard, a million times, which is it's lonely at the top, right? Now, where you are in your organization, it can be lonely. And having a coach is a trusted confidant who you can talk to about things within your organization that you're dealing with, that you're navigating. And it really is somebody that you can bounce things off of. And large corporations provide coaches to their executives, directors and executives all the time. And it can be very lonely at a smaller organization when you don't have that. When it's you and 5 other people, 10 other people, and you don't have someone that you can talk to because your name is on the company, right? Because you're supposed to feel like you feel like for one reason or another, you're supposed to have all the answers. You don't. And there are executive coaches like business coaches like I offer. There are also executive, CEO, business owner groups that I encourage people to be a part of, because you can go in there and be yourself and say, I'm having this problem, and hear 5 other business owners saying, I have the same problem, or I had that problem. So there are resources out there, whether you use me as a coach or whether you use any sort of those organizations or a friend. It can be lonely at the top, and it doesn't have to.
Love it, man. Ryan, always a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you for all the information that you've provided just in this short time we've had together. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that get value from it. If they want to continue and hear more from you or chat with you about either your coaching or your consulting programs, how can they reach you?
You can find me on my website at Spartan36solutions.com. That's the number 36. So Spartan36solutions.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Ryan Woolf with 2 O's. You can find me. And I would love to connect with anybody, whether you are looking to do business with me or not. Please connect. We can all go out and do great things together.
Love it. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's it for another episode of the Alea Systems Journey to an 8-Figure E-Commerce Business podcast. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please leave us a review. It costs you nothing and gives me and the folks who worked hard to produce this episode great feedback on how this content helped you. And that's why we do this, to make sure that you get to that 8-figure business even faster than we did. So tell us how we're doing, and please, please, please leave us a review. And if you know of another e-commerce entrepreneur who could benefit from hearing this content, please share it with them. They'll thank you for it. I'm your host, Emmanuel Alea, and we'll see you in the next episode.